Hello everyone and welcome, Nernstorm here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you my Magicka Warden PvP build for the Flames of Ambition patch. This build has been super fun for me to play in the last couple of weeks in everything PvP, especially in battlegrounds. It's been absolutely dominating with amazing KDR, and I've been looking forward to share this build with you all. I have 3 quick notes to make before we get started with this build. First of all, this build is using proc sets, so it is meant for everything in PvP except for Cyrodiil. I will be releasing a different build with a different video specifically meant for Cyrodiil in the next couple of weeks. I have a completely different Magden build that I've made for it, and it should be out very soon. However, this build is using proc sets, and it is meant for Imperial City, battlegrounds, and in theory dueling as well, even though it is not optimized for it. So make sure to not use this build in Cyrodiil, where a lot of your sets will not be working, but for everything else this build has been absolutely amazing and I definitely recommend it. Another note I want to make is that there is going to be a written version for this build finally, and it is going to be on my very own website. So if you guys missed it and you didn't catch any of the announcements so far, I got a brand new website that I recently made to host all of the written versions for all of my content, as well as a lot of different content that I have not released on YouTube between PvP builds and guides. There's a lot on it. The link to the website is going to be down below in the description, and it is just named nernstorm.com, so you can access it very easily. I've also teamed up with quite a few really good PvP players and content creators, a lot of which you guys probably know and might already be following for a lot of builds or PvP advice, and we've been working together to create a lot of really good builds on the website, so definitely make sure to check it out. There's a lot of content waiting for you there. And last, I wanted to give a quick shout out to my Patreons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for all the support throughout this time. I really appreciate you all helping me out and letting me keep creating content for you and everyone else. So if you guys enjoy my content and have been enjoying my build videos and guides for the past few years, or brand new viewers here and would like to support me, please check out my Patreon page. The link is going to be down below in the description. I would very much appreciate it. And now, without further ado, let's get started with this build. Starting with our character sheet, as you can see, we have 29 points into health rather than all the points just into the Magicka attribute. The reason for that is that we are trying to stack our health up as high as possible. We have a lot of healing power that comes from our max HP, so it is very important to get as high value on max health as possible to keep us alive very easily for a long amount of time. If we just go ahead and buff up real quick, you'll be able to see that our stats are at 30k max Magicka, 42k max health, and 21k max stamina. These are in a CP environment, and obviously will go a little bit down in battlegrounds and no CP areas, but those stats are very good. Our max health will allow us to have a really strong healing power, and between our max Magicka and max stamina, we are going to be able to survive and deal a lot of damage. Our Magicka recovery is only at 1200. However, if we just use our potion here, you'll be able to see that it goes over the 1500 mark and even goes beyond that through additional means of sustain that we have. But this is going to be more than enough for us to survive and to sustain on this build. Our health recovery is at 3400, which is obviously a huge amount. It goes up and down a lot with this build, and I'll go into detail a little bit later on how exactly we get our health regen. But it is very important because it will help us survive really well. It'll give us a lot of health per second in addition to all our heals, which are very powerful as well. Our spell damage on this build, if we just buff up real quick, you'll be able to see is at 3300 right now. However, this is without the back bar enchantment that we also have. So really, in reality, when we are fully buffed up, our spell damage is going to go towards the 4k mark, and our spell critical is very low. However, it's important to keep in mind that we are using Malakath on this build, so we don't need our spell critical offensively, and it is only there for our heals, which are strong enough as is, even without them critting. Our spell penetration right now is at 3500. However, we also use multiple sources for major breach debuff on enemies, which makes our penetration in reality around the 10k mark, a little bit more than that. If we look at our resistances here, by just buffing up real quick, you'll be able to see that we are at 30k spell resistance and 27k physical resistance with 22k critical resistance. So overall, we have a lot of resistances, a lot of damage, a whole lot of max health and health recovery, and a very decent Magicka recovery. This will let us survive and keep going for a very long amount of time, have a whole lot of healing power, and quite a bit of damage. But on top of all our offensive stats, we are using multiple proc sets with Malakath on this build, which do the majority of our damage. So overall, we are able to keep a lot of burst and a lot of pressure on our enemies and get many kills very, very easily. Next up to our sets, starting up with our Monster Helmet, we are using the new Baron Zedurus that just got released this patch. What this set does is giving you 4 ultimate every 3 times you apply a status effect to an enemy. To make this set mathematically relevant, more effective than Bloodspawn, and worth using in general, you need to be able to apply 3 different status effects to an enemy every 2 seconds or less. And that is a little bit of a difficult task, hence why not many people are using this set. However, we have a very unique method to ensure that we can do that. And that is on the front bar, we are using the charged trait, and we are using Force Pulse as our spammable. What Force Pulse does is apply 3 different damage types to an enemy player every single second that you cast it. And thanks to our charged trait, each one of these damage types has a very high chance of applying a status effect. This means that every single second you can apply 2 to 3 different status effects to an enemy, and if you cast the spammable that you use on this build 2 times in a row, you are likely to apply the effect of Baron Zedurus fully right away and get 4 ultimate. What this allows us to do is just cast our spammable freely whenever we want to throughout a fight, and without paying any extra attention to it, just getting a lot of ultimate from our Monster Helmet Baron Zedurus. The cool concept of that is that our ultimate on this build is used both offensively with our damage and defensively for both valuable buffs and for a lot of health regen, which we will get to a little bit later on. But this Monster Helmet allows us to have a lot of health regen and a lot of extra damage whenever we need it. Next, we are using Ice Furnace. Ice Furnace is a really powerful proc set. I've been using it for probably over 2 years now, even before the proc meta has existed, but obviously in this existent meta of a proc sets environment where procs do a lot more than they ever should have and are completely dominating the meta, Ice Furnace is just one of the most powerful sets you can use if you can reliably proc it. What it does is deal a flame damage with a really high value every single second whenever you deal a frost damage to an enemy, and this flame damage is dealt to all enemies within 8 meters. So it's a really powerful proc effect with a bit of a difficult condition, which is applying frost damage. The thing is, we are playing on a Magicka Warden, so applying frost damage every single second is really easy for us. Between using our spammable Force Pulse, applying damage with our Arctic Blast dot, or with our Northern Storm ultimate dot, it is really, really easy for us to apply frost damage all the time, which results in Ice Furnace proccing pretty much every single second very, very reliably and dealing a lot of damage to every single enemy in our area. Next, we are using Malakath. Malakath is a really powerful mythic, maybe the strongest item set in the entire game right now. Using just one piece of this mythic item, we are able to increase our damage done by 25%, and that applies to all of our damage. That includes our skill damage, and that includes our procs damage, and as we are using 3 different proc sets on this build, this makes our damage really, really strong, way stronger than it should be. In my opinion, this item set is completely imbalanced, but you know, it still exists, and Zos are not nerfing it in such a long time by now. It's been almost a year. Then it's time to use it and use it effectively. It makes our damage stronger with our Ice Furnace, and it makes our damage stronger with the rest of our proc sets, which we're going to discuss right now. So the next set we are using is indeed, you know it, you hate it, Vadistran Perfected Ice Staff. It doesn't have to be perfected, but Vadistran Ice Staff or Vadistran Destro in general is really, really important to have. This is probably the strongest proc in the entire game, at least damage over time proc in the entire game, and it is buffed further by Magicka. This set is absolutely busted, deals a whole lot of damage. You just have to cast weakness to elements on an enemy target, and for the next 10 seconds, unless they can go super far away from you, cloak or cleanse the debuff, this will just keep applying damage to them indefinitely for these 10 seconds, a massive amount of damage that you don't have to do anything to keep up other than staying around your enemy. That is all you have to do. They will keep taking a lot of damage, a lot of pressure, and you can just keep casting your abilities, healing, going offensive or defensive, it doesn't matter. You will still keep applying more and more damage to your enemy, and this is what makes this set so very powerful. It is absolutely busted, and we are using it. It is just that strong. On the other bar, we are using the Black Rose Lightning Staff. It, again, doesn't have to be perfected, but it is a nice little extra. And what it does is basically apply a little bit of a dot to all enemies in the area whenever you cast Impulse, which we're going to get into a little bit more when we discuss the skills. But this set, unlike Vattishran, that only hits the one target and enemies within the beam, the perfected Black Rose Staff hits all the targets that your Impulse hits. So in a battlegrounds match, you can apply it to, say, an enemy group of 4, or if the 2 enemies are fighting, you can even apply it to 8 people sometimes, and all of them will be taking the proc damage for the next 8 seconds. Really, really powerful effect. It is probably the second best proc arena weapon you can use after Vattishran, and since we are using Vattishran, it is a great option to use on your other bar. It is important to mention here that you don't have to use Black Rose on the front bar and Vattishran on the back bar. You can replace them and use Vattishran on the front and the Black Rose Destro on the back bar, just as long as you keep the back bar being an Ice Staff so you can block effectively, and the front bar being a Lightning Staff so you can have extra damage from all of your abilities and your sets. It is also important to mention that you do not need to have a perfected staff on either one of those, especially the back bar one, whichever you choose, is not important to be perfected, and even the front bar does not have to be perfected. Even the based version that are a lot easier to get are also really, really powerful, and they're perfectly fine on their own. The last set we are using on this build is Trainee. We are using 2 pieces of it because we have 2 extra pieces on our body slots that we can use, and Trainee is just a no-brainer here. If you have 2 extra slots that you want to utilize, Trainee gives you the most value for a 2-piece in the game that is not a monster helm or an arena weapon, which obviously we are already using. So 2 pieces of Trainee gives us max health, so our healing power is stronger, and max Magicka, so our damage is stronger. Just really easy pick, so we're using 2 pieces of that. We are using a lot of sturdy trait as well on this build because we are blocking effectively with our Ice Staff on the back bar. So to be able to mitigate a lot of incoming damage, we can always just swap back to the back bar and hold block. And thanks to all of our sturdy traits, we will be able to defend really, really well and mitigate a lot of the damage. Next, I'll go over every single one of the pieces I am using so you can see exactly the enchantment and the trait in each set that I am using. Next to our sets, starting up with the front bar, we've got Shock Ring, which is the morph of Impulse from the Destro skill line. This is not a very valuable skill, and we're only using it on our bar to activate the Black Rose proc. This is the only reason, so you can basically cast it as a debuff on an enemy target or multiple targets once every 8 seconds and then not cast this skill ever again in between. It is just meant for the Black Rose activation. Next, we got Dip Fisher. This is just the bread and butter of Magicka Warden. It's a big damage that is being dealt after 3 seconds, so you can time it in combination with other damage sources like your spammable and damage over times. Just really strong skill that you want to apply to your enemies every single time you can to deal a lot of damage to them. Also applies Major Breach, just really powerful overall. Next up, we got Bird of Prey, which we're using for the Minor Berserk, which increases our damage down by 5% just for having this skill slotted on our bar. And when we cast it, we also get Major Expedition for extra movement speed, so it's a very nice benefit. Next, we got Force Pulse, which is our spammable. We've already mentioned how it works with our Monster Helmet to generate a lot of ultimate. So it's just a very effective thing to use in the middle of a fight. You are able to deal 3 different types of damage to an enemy player, apply multiple status effects to them, and get a lot of ultimate back. Just really strong to use in the fight. Blue Betty is your source of a major sorcery. It also gives you some Magicka and cleanses negative effects off of you. And last on the front bar, we have got a Wild Guardian, which is the bear on the Warden skill lines. You can use any morph of this or even the unmorphed version of this skill because we never actively cast it in the middle of a fight. We only have it slotted on our bar for one reason, and that is the Advanced Species passive, which gives us 8% more damage on the front bar. Currently, 2% for each ability, so we are only slotting Wild Guardian on the front bar for the 2% extra damage on the front bar from all of our skills. That is the only reason, and we never actually cast the skill in a fight. On the back bar, we are using, first of all, Arctic Blast, just a really busted heal. It heals you off of your max health, and as we have 42k max HP when we are buffed up on CP environment, it gives us a massive amount of heals. Even in a no CP environment where our max HP is evidently lower, we still have a lot of healing power with Arctic Blast. Just a super strong, active, spammable heal that also gives you a heal over time, deals frost damage to enemies, which procs your Ice Furnace, and in addition, it stuns enemy players as well. What more can you ask for in one skill? Next, we've got Shimmering Shield, which is just an additional way of gaining more ultimate. You get a lot of ultimate from your Spammable and the Baron Zerus combo, but you also can get it from Shimmering Shield when you're more on the defense. And obviously, getting a lot of ultimate is very important on this build because we use it for both our offense with Permafrost, which we'll get to in a moment, and we get a lot of benefits from our ultimate using our CP passives as well, which we will get to in a bit as well. Next, we're using Living Trellis, which is a nice extra ability for heals that we are using. Gives you health every time you take damage and some more heals whenever you recast it or the effect expires. But the main reason we are using Living Trellis is because of the Green Balance passive, Accelerated Growth. This passive gives us major mending whenever we take damage under 40% HP. So as long as we have Living Trellis applied to us, whenever we go under 40% HP and we take any sort of damage, instantaneously we are getting our major mending effect, and then we can just keep casting our Arctic Blast to get more and more healing, and it will give us even extra on top of the base huge value just thanks to the major mending. Next, we are using Elemental Drain. This is a skill that normally gives you a lot on many builds. It is very powerful because it gives you both Major Breach and Minor Magicka Steal, but on a Magicka Warden, you won't normally use it because you already get your Major Breach from Dip Fisher. So the only reason we are using Elemental Drain right now on this build is because, just like the Impulse for the Black Rose effect, we need Elemental Drain for our Vadistron proc. So we are basically just using Elemental Drain on a target once per 10 seconds to apply Vadistron's proc. That is the only reason and that is the only benefit. And then we stop casting it for the next 10 seconds, and whenever Vadistron goes down, we cast Elemental Drain again on whatever target we choose and deal a lot of damage to them and all enemies between us and them. Next, we're using Ice Fortress, just gives us our Major Resolve and Minor Protection, two very relevant defensive buffs that we want to have on our build. And last, we are using Northern Storm, which is our ultimate, and I want to talk about a little bit more extensively here. So Northern Storm is a really overloaded ultimate. It deals frost damage to enemies around you, which also procs our Ice Furnace, which deals more flame damage to all the enemies around us. In addition, it slows down our enemies so that we can more easily catch them with the CC from Arctic Blast and hit them with our Dip Fisher. On top of that, it increases our max Magicka, which gives our damage skills a lot more damage, and our heals accept Arctic Blast more healing power, so it's very valuable to have that max Magicka increase just for the increase of our overall damage and healing. And on top of all that, it gives us major protection to us and all friendly players around us, so we basically get a huge power swing whenever we cast Northern Storm, especially in a BG match or whenever you're playing 1vx, because you are a lot tankier, you have a lot more healing power, but also you deal a lot of damage to enemies, you slow them down, and then your skills also get additional damage against them. So it is a very powerful ultimate to use, and we are able to use it very, very frequently because of all the ultimate regeneration that we have. But it is important to keep in mind that you don't have to cast Northern Storm on cooldown to start regenerating ultimate more and more right away, because we actually benefit a lot from having a high amount of ultimate without using our ultimate right away, thanks to our Champion Points passive, which we will get to right away.
Next to our champion points, I am currently showcasing this on the PTS, so I have max CP, but I'll go over everything that is important for you to use and what is the order of priority. So first of all, our active slottable champion points that we are using on the blue tree are Biting Aura, Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Resilience. The reason we are using those is, first of all, because Biting Aura gives us a lot of damage. It increases all our AoE damage, which is almost every single skill that we use on our kit. And then Duelist Rebuff and Unassailable are reducing our damage taken from single target and AoE abilities, which will help us survive a lot better. In addition, we are using Resilience, which is found in this mini tree, to give us extra critical resistance. It's just a little bit of extra because we don't have a lot of critical resistance by default, so this helps us have a lot more so that we can not die whenever we get hit by enemies who don't use Magicka and hit us critically very, very strong. In terms of the priorities on the blue tree, the points you want to start with are, first of all, the active points, slottable stars, whatever you want to call them. So the first things that are important to unlock are Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Biting Aura. After that, you want to unlock your Resilience. After you're done with all that, you can choose to prioritize your offense or your defense. If you want to prioritize your offense, you first of all want to focus on getting your, obviously, max Magicka and max stamina here, but then you want to go to the right side here into Extended Might and start unlocking stars over here, whether it's your penetration or your damage you deal with magical attacks, etc., etc. And then if you want to focus on the defense, you want to start up with Bless, that gives you a little bit more healing done, and then go into Starving Death, which gives you some forms of increased healing and mitigation from either physical attacks or magical attacks. And on top of that, you also have Precision, which is probably the least important passive to have from your CP. So it's always the last one you want to unlock on the blue tree, because we are using Magicka, and this increased critical chance is only good for our critical heals and is definitely not a priority here. For the red fitness tree, the active stars we are using are Strategic Reserve, Survival Instinct, Boundless Vitality, and Juggernaut. The reason we're using those is, I'll start with Boundless Vitality. We want to increase our max HP as much as possible so that our Arctic Blast heals us for more, and that is why we have our attribute points into health and why we have Boundless Vitality unlocked as well. Max HP is super important for us to have on Wardens because of the healing power we get from it. Next, there is Juggernaut, which gives us a lot of damage mitigation whenever we have crowd control immunity applied to us, and that is very frequently happening in PvP. You get stunned all the time, you break free, and you get crowd control immunity for the next few seconds. So it's important to have Juggernaut on pretty much any character, and is definitely a priority here. Next, we are using Survival Instincts. This is just because we're on a Magicka character, and Survival Instincts will help us roll dodge, break free, etc., etc. at less cost. Very, very important for us to have. And lastly, we have Strategic Reserve here. It gives us health regeneration based on the amount of ultimate we have. Since we stack our ultimate up very, very high, and the ultimate we use is already at a very high cost, Strategic Reserve normally gives us a lot of health recovery all throughout the fight. Whenever we choose to cast our ultimate to go into our big power swing, we get major protection from it, so we don't need our health recovery as much because we don't lose as much health. But as soon as the ultimate is over, if we already cast our spammable a few times, or maybe a shimmering shield up, we will already be at almost halfway to get our ultimate ability again by the time it's over, and we can even save up our ultimate beyond being ready to cast Northern Storm again, just to have a more health recovery. So whenever we want to be on the defense, we don't cast our ultimate, we just let Strategic Reserve work extra and give us a lot of health recovery to keep us going. And then whenever we want to go for that power swing, a lot of damage, and start killing enemies going from the defense to the offense, then we cast our Northern Storm and get going. In terms of the priorities here, we first of all, again, want to unlock our max health before anything else. Then we want to go for our active slottable stars, so that's Strategic Reserve here, Survival Instinct here, which you can unlock very easily by putting a couple of points into Mystic Tenacity. Then you can unlock your Boundless Vitality for the extra health as well, and Juggernaut right in here, which you can get through just a few points into Defiance. Beyond that, you want to focus most of your points after that into breaking free and into blocking, which is the entire area on the right. After you're done with that, you can focus a little bit on the less important aspects like movement speed, sprinting, and roll dodging, which are things you're going to do a lot less throughout fights on this build. For the green craft tree, you don't really care about the majority of these points, so these are just my personal recommendations rather than things that are super important for you to have. I like putting points into breakfall first, because if you jump off cliffs in PvP, especially dropping off buildings in Imperial City or even in Cyrodiil, not on this build but on others, dropping off of a bit of a tower or off of cliffs, it is really important to not take as much fall damage as your enemies will be taking when they're chasing you. Beyond that, we like Steed's Blessing here because it increases our movement speed before the fight starts. Of course, when we get into combat, it is irrelevant, but for example, in battlegrounds, when you're running from your spawn into an enemy team until you get hit or start hitting enemy players, this is taking effect and is relevant. I also like Liquid Efficiency to not waste as much money on potions and poisons, and similarly Rationaire to give you extra duration for your food and drink buff. And then there's also War Mount, which is very nice in Imperial City and Cyrodiil when you're just riding on your mount and you want to be able to ride fast and not care about getting dismounted very easily despite sprinting a lot. Next, for some additional pieces of information, we are using the Lord Mundus on this build to increase our max health, same as we put the attribute points into health and prioritize health in our champion points as well. It's really important to increase our max HP so we get a lot of healing power out of Arctic Blast. We are using the Bewitched Sugar Skulls as well because it increases our max HP, stamina, and magicka and gives us health recovery, which works together with the big value of health recovery we get from our champion points stars as well. For the potions we use on this build, we are just using very simple tri-stat potions, whether crafted or crown store ones. Very, very simple stuff. We are using them just to get all of our recoveries increased and get a surge of all three stats as well. We don't need to use anything like spell power pots because we already have all of the relevant buffs already in our skills kit. For the race we are using on this build, I personally prefer Breton because of the cost reduction to Magicka abilities more than anything else. In addition, it obviously gives you a little bit of resistance and Magicka recovery, and it gives you your max Magicka, but the main benefit of Breton is the cost reduction for all Magicka abilities, which is the vast majority of abilities on our bars. This is the only cost that is really relevant. And it is alright to use other races on this build. You can use Argonian, you can use Dark Elf or High Elf, but my personal favorite is by far Breton. We're also not using Werewolf or Vampire on this build as well, as those don't have any relevancy and only give us penalties if we chose to use them. We don't actually benefit from them at all. And that's about it. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this build video and will find this build useful on your Magicka Wardens as well. If there's anything that's unclear, maybe I went over something a bit too fast or you couldn't quite catch up on everything, feel free to check out my written build. The link to which will be down below. It is on my own website and it has a lot more information, so hopefully everything you're looking for will be right there. If you have any questions beyond that, feel free to reach out in the comment section down below or on my Discord server, the link to which will be down in the description. There's also my other socials if you'd like to check out my live streams on Twitch. I stream ESO PvP 5 times a week and you can go ahead and check that out and see me play this build and many others live. And there's also my Twitter where I occasionally do giveaways, so feel free to check that out. Lastly, I want to say once again, thank you so much to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you for supporting me and helping me keep creating content for everyone else. I really appreciate you guys. And that's about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys some gameplay footage of this build in action in some battlegrounds. So go ahead and check that out, and I'll see you all in the next one.